Edition of our Marks Group GoldMine Tips and Tricks webinar. We put on these tips and tricks webinars once a month. You can always visit our tips and tricks from ages past by going to blog.marksgroup.net. What are we looking at this month? Well, we're going to look at how to use filters in the Search Center. Not only how to use filters, but how to create them as well. We're going to look at the consequences of alarming everything. We're going to look at how to effectively use the Notes tab. And we will look at some simple SQL queries, and if we have some time, we'll go through how to add toolbar items to your top-level toolbar in GoldMine. Let's jump right in with filters in the Search Center. This is one of the most unsung items in GoldMine nowadays, and it really is a tragedy. So from the Search Center itself, which I can easily get to at any point by going to Search, a nice shortcut that I like to use is to actually double-click on the field label itself that I want to search by. So, for instance, if I want to search by company, I double-click on the word company, and I'm searching by company, so on and so forth. Okay, so now that I'm in the Search Center, a couple of things that I can do with filters. The first thing, the easiest thing to do, is to actually reveal my filters and groups using this Filters Groups button here. And what that does is that will reveal any filters or groups that I have listed. In this case, it defaults to my username. Of course, if you've been using a public area for your filters, you can certainly change it by clicking on your name here and selecting the public area thusly. So now that we can actually see our groups and our filters in this little nice tree view, as you might imagine, I can actually look at the contents of one of those filters within my Search Center. The way we do that is we double-click on it. I was hoping to go back so I could explain a little more about this. But at any rate, what you do is you double-click on the element you want to preview. And then you're going to get this little Search Center filter optimization warning. The nutshell answer is no, you do not want to apply a limit because that's a little more advanced than what we're going to be getting into today. So right here we can see that my New York Prospects filter is now previewed within my Search Center. I can always tell if I have a filter being previewed within the Search Center because I have this little previewing active verbiage in my tab here. And that's actually very important to realize because if I close my Search Center and reopen it, you'll see that it has now reset itself. So if you want to preserve or have that filter persist, whatever filter you happen to be using, just keep in mind that you shouldn't go ahead and close that. Conversely, if you want to release this filter, if you want to get your Search Center back to the plain old vanilla Search Center that you know and love, of course, it's easy enough to close and reopen the Search Center, or you can right-click here and release preview. It's the same thing. You can always tell that the preview is released, that it goes back to being called the Contact Search Center. So this is a really nice way to actually leverage some of those lovely complex filters and groups you guys have been working on for years and years. Why it's neat to be able to do that here is because, well, the easiest answer would be that I have full control over the columns that are being displayed here. So I can go ahead and click this columns button, go to my column selection, and then I can add pretty much any fields I want to appear in my list. I want to add my phones, easy enough to do. And there are my phones. So the number one thing that I see people using this functionality for is to preview a filter, add the columns they want, and then right-click and output to Excel. There is no easier way that I know of to export a filter from GoldMine into a spreadsheet. It's done. It's there. And just because those values are hidden doesn't mean they're not there. Very good. Okay, so the other half of that stupid pet trick would be, how do I create a filter in my Search Center? Let's go ahead and actually close my filters tree. And I want to draw your attention to this little plus sign here, and you'll see that as I click the plus sign, I'm adding levels to my search. As you might imagine, the minus symbol subtracts levels from my search. So let's imagine we're looking at state is equal to New York, and company is not empty. So now I have two levels going on here within my search center. So not only does it need to be a New York record, it needs to be a New York record with something in the company field. And certainly you can add levels until you're blue in the face. I'm not sure if there's a numerical limit here. If there is, it's all the way down the page, and I can't imagine being that complex with it. Now that we have our nice compounded search to play within our search center, it is the easiest thing in the world now to click this Save button and to click Save as Filter. So what we're doing right now is we're saving this compound search as a GoldMine filter, and that gives you all of the lovely things that a GoldMine filter normally does. So I'm going to call this New York Companies, and I'm going to save that in the public area so everyone can get to it. Bam. Let's go ahead and close and reopen our search center and take a look at how that appears. I'm going to open up my filters view. I have to go back to my public area. New York Companies, there they are. I double click to preview. Power search bad, just click no. Okay, very good. So this is a really nice way. I don't know if you guys have been around for a while, but the old way of creating filters was to go to your filters menu here and create a new filter here, and then go to your build tab, and then you would actually build up your filter using expressions. So you would say, in this case, state, if you can find it, that is, state is equal to New York. And you would have to insert your condition, then click the and then say company is blah, blah, blah. Now, the only benefit that this little filter builder gives you, if you're that advanced, is it does give you the ability to create parentheses. And that will help you control the flow in which the expression is evaluated. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. You probably will never care. But again, the filter builder tab is really only for advanced users at this point. If you just want a quick and dirty, simple filter, it's easy enough to do it right here from the search center. I'm going to go ahead and release my filter now. Back to the good old search center. I love it. Moving right along. Alarming everything. This is something that I actually see a lot of in the field. So if I schedule a call, I'm going to call this my test call. Of course, we're good little users, so we always put in call notes, or call nots, as you might imagine they could be called. I'm going to schedule this call, as amazingly enough as it sounds, for yesterday. And I'm going to make that 8 a.m. A nice shortcut is to just type in 8A. That becomes 8 a.m. 2P becomes 2 p.m. For those military personnel, certainly 15 becomes 3 o'clock p.m. In this case, I want to make it 8 a.m. yesterday, and I'm going to alarm it. You'll see here that when I alarm something in GoldMine, it always likes to default itself to 10 minutes before the actual scheduled time of the event. Certainly, you can make that alarm time be whatever you want it to be. The moral of the story is that I'm trying to get to, now I'm going to go ahead and schedule this. There's my alarm. That alarm comes up in GoldMine, certainly, as you all know, when something is overdue. Now, a lot of you might have a bunch of calls scheduled for today. In this case, I only have the one in my little test database. Most of the clients that I do work for have sales reps that will have, at the very least, I would say, let's say 20 calls a day scheduled on the same calendar day. Now, if every one of those calls is alarmed, what you end up getting, and let me demonstrate this. Let me schedule another call. I want to show you how multiples show up here. This will be my test 2. And that was also supposed to take place yesterday. So now when I have multiple alarmed events, or multiple events that are alarmed rather, they're all going to show up as part of one alarm. So everything that is outstanding at the moment, everything that is overdue at the moment is going to show up in this one alarm window. You're not going to get a separate alarm for every separately alarmed call. You're going to get this one unified window. Now, where that might be a danger is that if you have sales reps that get into the habit of alarming everything or almost everything, you're going to end up with a lot of stuff showing up here in this list. And now let's talk about a little bit about the things that you can do with these alarms once they pop. My personal favorite is to actually snooze an alarm, so I can snooze. Now keep in mind that when I have multiple items here, whatever I select here will only affect the currently selected alarm. So if I want to snooze one of these, I have to select the appropriate alarm and snooze. And 2 minutes is always my favorite. Ignore is kind of like an auto snooze. I believe that auto snooze is for like 2 minutes or so. Suspend alarms will suspend all of your alarms until the next time you log into GoldMine. And that really is what I see a lot of people doing in the field, so to speak, was that they'll alarm absolutely everything because to them everything is important, right? And I guess that makes sense. But then they'll end up just suspending their alarms because they're continually inundated by all these GoldMine alarms. And when I suspend them, they go away forever and ever. Well, at least until I log back into GoldMine, which I'm going to do right now. And I'm going to wait patiently and sweat a few bullets while I wait for my alarms to come back up. Kind of wish I had the Jeopardy theme song to play for you all. Let me go ahead and schedule another call while we're waiting. Make this test 3. Again, that was a yesterday call, and that was 10 a.m. yesterday, and schedule. And there we go. Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to tell you guys is that alarming is great, and these screen pops really are valuable because right from the screen pop, I can, look at my notes for any particular call. I can complete the call right from here, or I can certainly go to the actual contact in the database that the call is associated with. So it's very useful. But it should only be used, in my humble opinion, for important stuff. If you alarm absolutely everything, then everything becomes the same as everything else. So there's no priority at that point, I guess, is the moral of the story. The big problem that I see in the field is that if you alarm everything, then things get lost. Things get lost through the cracks because end users will get automatically used to suspending their alarms just to get this damn screen pop off of their screen. And certainly, we always want to make sure to complete our calls like a good GoldMine user. So I'm going to go ahead and just complete these calls, send them to history. Obviously, when I complete these calls and send them to history, even if I didn't get a hold of the guy, here's what I do in my line of work. If I call a client and he's not around, I leave a result of left voicemail. That's all. That gets it off of my calendar. It shows the boss on a report that I did my job and that the client wasn't there. And if we complete all these calls, then our alarms go away. So I guess a two-pronged approach might be appropriate. Alarm only the important things. And also, and this cannot be stressed enough, complete your pending items. Because what they're doing is they're continually building up on your calendar. They're making it messy. And they're junking up, as you can see here, I'm one of the worst offenders of all. It's junking up your pending folder, or your pending tab, rather, on the contact records themselves. Let's move right along. Using notes. Another cautionary tale. The Notes tab. Back in the day, it was, well, I say back in the day, back when GoldMine was not running on SQL Server, back when it was version 4.0, this was a great little thing, and we had clients that would use it all the time. The Notes area is a very general, free-form text area where I can just simply add a note. I can add anything I want, even HTML text. So if I copy and paste something off of a web page, it'll look like the web page in here. If I copy something out of a Word document, it will retain the font choice and the formatting and the color and all that great stuff. So that we can see that right away the Notes tab is so easy to add stuff. So easy. Which is why it's a bit seductive in that case, because the average end user is told, I want you to mark every phone call that you make to this client. It needs to be marked in GoldMine. We're going to be tracking this in GoldMine. So instead of going to complete phone call, which is where phone calls should go, what I see a lot of in the field are people just adding a note called about the widget 5000, no need currently. There, I'm done. That's my phone call. And that's all well and good, but when it comes time to actually report on that, if you want that call to appear on a report, it becomes very problematic for the actual report writer, for your data guy in the back room. He's going to be tearing his hair out because the notes aren't very useful other than the fact that you can easily add them. A call should always go into the history from my complete menu. Now the reason for that is manifold. If I go into my history, I can see that for every history I have obviously a reference, a date, a time, a duration, an activity code, a result code, both optional. Of course, I have call notes and all of these good things associated with every single call history item. In the Notes tab, I don't have that. In the Notes tab, I have some person wrote a note at this time and date. That's all you get. So if you wanted to report on, say, number of calls versus number of appointments versus number of next actions, all of which are found underneath our complete menu here, you can't do it with the Notes tab. The other danger to the Notes tab is depending upon which version of GoldMine you're running, your Notes tab could be running out as we speak, man. So the idea is that the Notes tab used to be limited. It is not as far as GMPE 2013 and above, as far as I know. Anything I believe 8.5 and older will be limited. What do I mean by that? I mean that your Notes tab is running out. So as you add new notes to the top here, as I'm adding new notes to my tab, my older notes are actually vanishing from the bottom if you get to that limit. True enough, that limit is huge. It's unmistakably huge. It's pages upon pages upon pages. But if you own a GoldMine for 10 years, you're going to meet that limit. I have lost count of the number of clients that have called me and said, well, we've lost history. So, well, what do you mean you've lost history? Well, the notes are gone. Our notes are gone. I look at their notes tab, and what they're looking for are notes from 5 and 6 years ago that should be at the very bottom of the tab, but are not there anymore because they've been erased to make room for new incoming notes. I'm not trying to make this situation any more confusing than it might already be. My point is that the Notes tab is a very general area and is very good for putting things like driving directions, or perhaps a synopsis or a summary of the client's business. Something that everybody should be able to see because Notes is very viewable, it's very publicly accessible, but nothing that we're going to need to put on a report at some point. It's just a bad idea. Again, things like calls and appointments should always go in history underneath my complete menu. Why this is a good idea is I have more data points to look at as far as each history row. I have a reference, a code, a result, a date, a time, a duration, and I have notes, and I have the ability to mark it successful or unsuccessful, and I have the ability to link it to a project or an open trouble ticket. Much more robust, much more easier to work with. Now I'm going to skip ahead right now to our last topic, adding the toolbar items, because I feel this is important at the moment. If you have end users that are pushing back against using history, well, listen, I'd love to use history, but you know, this whole complete unscheduled call, outgoing call is just a pain right in the butt, and you might have people that resist that. A nice way to kind of nip that in the bud, so to speak, is to actually add the outgoing call and the incoming call to the top level toolbar. So instead of having to navigate my complete menu, I can simply click on either one of these to start my incoming or outgoing call into history. Now, how do you get those buttons on the toolbar? It's like the best kept secret in GoldMine. We're going to find and click the little down arrow guy here, add remove buttons, go to customize, then on to commands. And from here, you'll see that for every menu item on the top level GoldMine menu, I have corresponding toolbar buttons that I can add here. Now, the way that we add buttons to our toolbar is we find the button we want to add, and we simply left click drag, click drag, up until it becomes this little divider. That's going to be where it goes. So I can add next action and appointment. If I want to delete buttons off of my toolbar, like things that I never use, I can right click and delete. Right click and delete. I love it. So good. Button close. And now certainly I can start my next action much more easier and start my appointments much, much more easier. In this case, it's a little confusing because I have a lot of open appointments for this contact record. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to simple SQL. This is another thing that I wish I saw used more in the field. SQL, or Structured Query Language, or Standard Query Language, depending on if you're a Microsoft guy or not, is the universal database language we use to ask questions of a database. And we find this tool in our SQL query item underneath our Tools menu. Now, I'm going to go back to my blog post, and the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to have to think too hard about this. I want to go ahead and copy and paste some code that I had laying around. So please feel free to go here to blog.marshgroup.net. You will be able to run these queries right from your own GoldMine without a problem. So this query right here will give me all of the calls completed in the last 7 days. So what I do is I take that text, I copy it, and I'm going to paste that into my query analyzer, is what it's called, and then I can query. And here are the 3 calls that I just made as part of this demonstration. Now, what we're seeing here, when we run things out of our SQL Query Analyzer or query tool, we're seeing absolutely all of the columns or all of the fields on the back end of the database. So what we're seeing here is we're actually selecting star, which means give me everything out of the table. In this case, the table we're looking at is the history table, or the cont hist table. That is where all the history goes. So what I'm looking at, so what the query is saying is that give me all of the rows from cont hist, from the history table, where my date is greater than or equal to 7 days ago. And this srec type equals C. That just means that it's a call. You'll see here once you start querying the history table that there are all kinds of rec types, like C is a call, A is appointment, T, I believe, is next action, S is a sale, so on and so forth. But just I want to just kind of give you guys a flavor for what's going on in the back end, because now that you can query out all of the columns on the back end, it's very easy to select exactly what columns you want to see here. So instead of selecting star, maybe I want to select, and I'm going to use the column names that I see here, my user ID. I also want to select my on date. I also want to select my ref. And I also want to select my notes. And now when I requery, it's only going to output those 4 columns. And there they are. Once I've played with a query enough to where I'm happy with it, I can simply save it here. I'm going to save this as calls in the last. And there we are. Now that query will appear as an item in this drop-down list here. You can see that I actually use this quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I submit my billing to the Marks group based upon a query out of GoldMine. So again, if I look at my calls in the last 7 days, it's easy enough to click that. Why queries are neat is because they're extremely advanced. And not only are they advanced, they're extremely fast. They are typically like a one-click kind of deal, whereas a report might have to churn and churn and churn. A SQL query is lightning fast. It's amazing. Now that I have my list of stuff, I can always feel free to right-click and output to Excel. And there we are. This is exactly what I do when I submit my invoice to Gene every Monday. So the SQL query tool we can see is a very, very nice and fast way to export just stuff out of GoldMine into Excel. What it's not going to do for you is do like sum totals and calculations. I mean, not that it couldn't. It certainly can. But that's something that you typically wouldn't want to do here within the little query builder that GoldMine gives you. A couple other examples to play with on the blog. In this case, we can see that this query right here is going to give us, let me go ahead and just erase that stuff out of there. This is going to give us all the stuff out of history and the last 30 days that is an appointment. And I'm not sure if I have any. No, I don't. Change that back to C for calls, and there we go. So once you look at a few of these example queries, you might feel a little comfortable to actually start changing things about the queries. I would highly recommend anybody who is very interested in this to actually look for and download the GoldMine Premium API manual, and what that is going to give you, and the back end is going to give you a list of all the tables in GoldMine, which is what you're going to need when you start selecting from things like contest. That would tell you that contest is where the history is stored. It will tell you that contact 1 is where your primary stuff is stored. I don't want to go on too long about the SQL queries themselves, but I just wanted to kind of give some of you folks just the idea that this stuff is there. It works very, very well. And to be honest with you, once you get into it, they're not that hard to figure out. And that's going to take up all the time we have today. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Our blog, again, is blog.marksgroup.net. If you like what you see, you like what you hear, feel free to hit that subscribe button, and we'll be seeing you guys again next month. Thanks so much, and have a great day.